In 2020, the world was hit by a global pandemic that shut down everything. Sports, gone. Movie theaters, gone. Bars, clubs, and restaurants, and anything that involved human interaction, gone and double gone. So during that horribleness of that was 2020, what was the one thing that kept people, that had people had as entertainment that could keep them going throughout this mundane, dark time? Streaming platform. All platforms had a huge succession increases from YouTube TV, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, while Netflix is the only one that increased their grip on the streaming game. You saw shows such as Queen's Gambit, The Boys, The Mandalorian, amazing show. Little Fires Everywhere, rewatches of old show, I love The Office, get more attention. Hell, even anime got a bump in viewership. Why? We were all stuck in the house. Literally, we were bored in the house and in the house bored. And with the use of such apps as TikTok and Instagram, newer shows were getting more shine and more prominence. But going into 2020, Disney had an issue on their hands. After delays of their Marvel movies, Black Widow, The Eternals, and Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings, say that 10 times fast. A lot of fans were worried about the momentum of the MCU after the last movie or property that was a part of the proper Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're not going to count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., was Spider-Man Far From Home. That was in 2019. So how is Marvel going to make this up? By dropping one of its most creative stories in the MCU today in WandaVision. This is Jay Tezla's review of WandaVision. To break this review down, we have to go through three different categories: story, cinematography, and acting. Let's start with the story. Now, before we go into it, please note, I want to say this right now, for anyone that's watching this, please note that while I have seen all 9 episodes, I just got done watching the 9th episode. This review is only going to take into account the previous 8 episodes in the series. The 9th episode will be its own review, as in that we definitely be taking part where the story goes from that episode. I did it this way so the review can be on time, because catch those analytics, because we are pretty far in the show to give a good review, and so that people can say it's still about the final episode. Now, going into the story, Marvel over 23 films has done a good job of doing what I like to call presentable adaptation, in which they take a character, a storyline that has a major impact on them, and using the framework of that set storyline, tell a story in the context of not only the characters of that character's journey, but the context of the overall MCU. Give a perfect example of that. Perfect example would be Captain America: Civil War. Sure, on one hand, you had the same players. You had to say that you need to see. You need to see Steve Rogers and Tony Stark on opposite sides and fight. But the reasons why, compared to the comic versus the movie, are different, as seen right here. In the comic, Tony and Cap's fight involved the Superhuman Registration Act. While in the movie, it had the bones of that framework, but that was all in a backdrop to introduce us to Baron Zemo, T'Challa, aka the Black Panther, and Peter Parker, Spider-Man, while still giving Zemo his ultimate villain role and beginning his arc. I said to say that WandaVision is the exact same thing and paying homage to 2 of his core comic books. Wanda Maximoff's House of M, as seen in episode 8, where Wanda creates her Westview and Wanda and Vision's run. And with that, we have to talk about how that was teased throughout the entire thing. We were thinking, oh, this is her House of M, and someone made it for her, when in all actuality, she made it herself. The second thing that was used as an inspiration for this book, for this series, was Wanda and Vision's run in the Vision and Scarlet Witch, which kind of ties in the West Coast Avengers a bit, where we get to see Billy, Tommy, and the White Vision, which we see in episode 8. Now, the story is a bit confusing when you watch the first episode. That is the one detriment I will give this show. The first episode is kind of dry. It really is. But we learn that roughly 3 months after Avengers Endgame, Wanda wants to know where Vision's body is to give him a proper funeral, only to find SWORD, which is not a bad organization, it's just ran by a dick, dismantling him. And once she finds his parting gift to her in a house not yet built in Westview, New Jersey, because it's Jersey, unleashes the full brunt of her chaos magic. It creates the hex she and Vision she creates to live in and grow old together. And by the way, she uses magic to create the hex, not her mutant power, which is again a presumable adaptation, as she isn't a mutant that was enhanced by the Infinity Stone, but rather a sorcerer enhanced by the stone. So, to break this down a little bit, in the comics, as that presumable adaptation. In the comics, she was thought to be Magneto's child, her and her brother. It turns out they're actually not his kids. In the comics, I believe she is blessed by a demon which gives her powers, but they didn't go that far in WandaVision. We'll talk about episode 9 later and how that ties into everything, but we'll go into that later. But speaking of the Stone, Vision is given the purpose of being the voice of the audience. He literally is our voice talking. He's us talking to Wanda in the show. As he tries his hardest to figure out what is going on while also trying to figure out what his life was prior to Westview. It's not until later that we learn the truth about Vision, that he is the second iteration of Vision, not the first, which is something that the 8th episode, we were sure it was our Vision, but that this show had made it perfectly clear our Vision is gone. The Vision that we knew from Avengers, Age of Ultron, Civil War, Infinity War, and not an Endgame, but those movies is no longer here. We are going into a new Vision, as ironically. And that is something that the show handles quite well as a general theme. How do people with that much, it's something we have to get over. And the show does a really good job of asking that, building as a general theme. How do people with that much power deal with loss and PTSD? Wanda's entire life has been filled with this. From the day her missile killed her parents, to her brother's death, to having the man she loved died not once, but twice. And then knowing that everyone is now suffering in this town because of it. It's not just Wanda. Monica is the other person that is directly dealing with grief and loss, as her mother was dying from cancer, so was able to get into remission, only for the snap to happen, and now her mother's gone, and then her aunt, Captain Marvel, is off world. The way they use the show to cathartically allow Wanda and Monica to heal by facing their own truth is not only great storytelling, but pushes forward the overall MCU storyline, as this show alone has connections to Miss Marvel, Doctor Strange, especially Doctor Strange, Spider-Man No Way Home, and even possibly even Fantastic Four, and maybe even Captain Marvel 2. But that's what I think in regards to story. Let's go to cinematography. I am a huge nerd. I'm a film nerd. I am a music nerd. I'm a comic book nerd, as you can tell with the shirt and everything around me. But I am specifically also a film nerd. I love when small things are used in a way to tell a story, and WandaVision does that in spades. First of all, using classic TV shows such as Modern Family, Malcolm in the Middle, Brady Bunch, and even Roxanne to tell an overall story and to show the madness of what Wanda is going through was ingenious. Each show was not only using its own specific cinematography in the show, but WandaVision created something special by using its transitions from it as a way to tell you when the show was leaving the hex created by Wanda and was going on to the real with the easiest thing in the world, changing the aspect ratio. So what you see where we're in now, that's the aspect ratio with the black lines above and below me. Every time the aspect ratio changed, you knew it was something big, and you knew it was something that was going to alter the way you as the viewer see the show. A perfect example of this was in episode 3, 4, and 8, especially 8, when the music and the aspect ratio shifted and made the show escape the hex. This is scene when Wanda actually goes into the basement of Agatha's house, and you see the aspect ratio change from being this to then stretching. You see it actually decreases. Actually see that, and it's a great way of visually storytelling, like saying we're walking outside of Wanda's hex, and now we're not in Wanda's vision anymore. We're in the MCU's vision. This show does amazing things. Even the way they illustrate the magic of the show is seen as small things, which was something I thought we were going to see later in the season, which we did, but we see it even in the beginning of the season, such as Wanda rewinding time at the end of episode 2, or her changing the color of the show in episode 2. And then the best thing to me was in episode 3, where she edited Vision's mindset as a jump cut and then rewind the cut without having to do the whole rewind feature.
This room is hard, dimmer. Outside. outside with her. 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 Ou Something's wrong here, Wanda. Yes, I know what you mean. The truth is, we are in uncharted waters.
And speaking of episodes, I love how each episode gives nothing away while letting us know what kind of episodes we are getting. Episode 2, aka Don't Touch That Top Dial, directly signifies Jimmy Woo trying to contact Wanda, but she wants to be stuck in the hex. While episode 8, also known as Previously On, signifies the seeing the truth about Wanda's history from her perspective. So we're going to see everything how she saw it, not how she just told it. Because sure, we've had this story told to us by Wanda, and we've seen bits and pieces of it, but now to see it through her lens and her eyes was very captivating. Now, while I love how the show was done in all the episodes, as I said before, the first second episodes were been taken until the ending of the second episode, wherein I realized that this show was going more for an FX Legion vibe, and that the story is there. It just involves a journey for you to get through. It just involves a journey for you to go on with Matt Shakeman, who, by the way, deserves his flowers and his praise. Who I didn't know directed one of my favorite Game of Thrones episodes, which is Spoils of War. If you don't know what that episode is, that's the episode with this. For this to be Matt Shakeman's first full director, executive producer show, this was a great one to begin with, which leads us to talking about the last final part of this, the acting. Let's start from the bottom to the top. So we're gonna there's a pyramid of people I want to give praise to. First of all, Randall Park and Kat Dennings absolutely killed their roles. We're talking about two people that came from two different movies that are completely different from what WandaVision was going to be. Randall Park playing Jimmy Woo in the Ant-Man series, Kat Dennings playing Darcy Lewis from the Thor series. These are two actors coming from completely different parts of the MCU, and they seamlessly integrate into this show without losing a step. Jimmy Woo was lovable, but also not just there for comic relief. And Dennings' Darcy Lewis not only has blossomed into her own character, not just a gag character, but is our guy as to what's happening outside the bubble in the MCU, and help the general audience know that despite the show taking place after Far From Home, that WandaVision is actually set before the Spider-Man sequel. That was incredibly important because everyone's trying to figure out where in the timeline is this set. Is this after Far From Home? And now that we see that was before Far From Home, it kind of helps explain things. Evan Peters being in the show was an absolute shock to me. I heard rumors of that happening, but I didn't think it was going to actually happen. I just thought that this show was going to bring him in as Mephisto. And boy, was I'm not going to say what I was on that. But bringing him in as just a recasted version of Aaron Taylor Johnson's Quicksilver was purely genius. He's funny, but then the lines that he says in the show, especially episode 6 and episode 7, they make you think he's someone else. They make you think, who is he really? What is he really doing here? Tiana Paris is the unsung MVP of the show. She is the sixth man off the bench. She is your triple double queen of this show. When I first saw Dear White People, I never thought, oh yeah, the girl who played Coco would then go on to play one of the greatest black female superheroes ever. Her portrayal of Monica Rambeau was not only inspired every time she was on the screen, but in the 6 episodes she's in, she's not in all 9 episodes, made me more excited for Captain Marvel 2 and her relationship with Miss Marvel and Carol will be going forward. You can see that there's definitely a rift between those two characters that Carol doesn't know about yet, or maybe she does, that we have not seen yet. And then how does her mother get involved in this? How does her powers now get involved? We'll see a lot of that. And that's going to be really interesting seeing what happens later. Now, before we get to the gold star of this show, let's talk about the silver and bronze. That goes to Paul Bettany and Catherine Hahn. Paul has always been an amazing actor, and in this show, not only does he show his range, but he shows that he's extremely funny. The second episode where Vision swallows the gum and he is just losing it and he can't complete a magic show act was absolutely hilarious. His character was funny. It was, but once he began to see the hex for what it was, you began to see the horror. The horror aspect was coming in through him because he was afraid, he was terrified, and the fact that Paul was able to pull that role off while being this sentient being that is stronger than damn near everyone in Marvel except for Wanda was amazing. But Catherine Hahn, what else can we say about her? Originally, everyone thought that the character that she was the character she turned out to be, which was Agatha all along, but her acting had everyone fooled into believe that she was another perfect person affected by the hex. Everyone thought when this show was originally going to be casted and her character was called Agnes, well, oh, she's Agatha Harkness. That makes sense. And then watching the show keep going, you're like, well, no, maybe she is the person involved with this hex and she doesn't know it yet. But then when the flip happens and she actually is who we find out she is, it shows her range and how good her portrayal is that you believe that her story was innocent. Remember, this is the same woman that played the voice actor for the female Doc Ock in Spider-Verse. So I'm almost not surprised, but I am. But the person that takes the crown for this show, that was the gold star, is Elizabeth Olsen. Watching this show, and I mean, there's no cap behind this. It is no doubt in my mind that other Benedict Cumberbatch, the title for Best Actor in the MCU right now belongs to her. It's not even close. It's not just her accent range from on a moment's notice. I love that call out in episode 8. That was hilarious. But the fact that Olsen embodies the era of each episode she's put in, while also being inside a comic book series, while also being in Kevin Feige's MCU as a possible anti-hero / villain, was amazing. There are points in this show where you forget she is a hero. A perfect example of that would be the episode where Evan Peters shows up. There's a scene, and it's I believe it's the Roseanne episode. The scene where Vision is talking to Wanda, and he tells her, "You can't control me like the others." And then Wanda says, "Can't I?" That sounds villainous. And then they leave the room, and they begin that fight, and Wanda tries to sound apathetic to what's going on. She's like, "I'm not doing all this." But part of you believes she is, because you just saw her earlier, literally. And this is something I love more than anything else. There's a 5-minute span in that episode where she goes from being the version of Roseanne Barr that's inside the hex to being an actual supernatural monster, to being a pissed off Avenger, to being a possible villain rivaling Thanos in power by literally turning all the guns of the sword agents onto Hayward, which he definitely deserved. I have been a person that does not like to advocate for any one person winning awards, but if WandaVision and especially Elizabeth Olsen do not win a primetime Emmy for Best Actress, we as a collective community, television community, should riot. And that's even if a Marvel show wins over it. So if Loki, if Falcon and Winter Soldier, whatever, I don't care. Elizabeth Olsen needs her flowers ASAP for this role. That was an amazing performance, especially when you watch episode 9. I guarantee you, get the tissues ready. It's going to be a tearjerker. This show is absolutely perfect. For this to be the first thing we get to start off a new saga for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it felt absolutely refreshing. And sure, a lot of people will say that the only reason this show was so good is because we haven't had an MCU property for a year, and like any bad habit you fall back into, you fall back in hard. But that couldn't be further from the truth. As the show kills that needed habit in the first 2 episodes, legitimately, once you get past those first 2 episodes, you're now just watching an MCU property. And for this to be the first Disney Plus property we're getting from the MCU, as you can see, I'm wearing Doctor Strange shirt, and we're going to talk about him in the next video. This show proves that Marvel can do any storyline in any genre, especially if they give the directors the ability. If Marvel is what I can tell Marvel is doing this. They're giving people the framework they have to operate in and telling them, create me a story, but understand, I need it in this framework, and I need to tie in not only into the character's backstory, I need to tie into the overall MCU as well, while also building a future for those characters going forward. You could have the playground to make how you want to make your story, but understand I need those three conditions met. And every time Marvel has knocked it out the park because they're giving the creators creative freedom, unlike certain people. This show is MCU's Legion. The only difference is that this show feels completely fresh. Not saying Legion didn't feel fresh, and what we are watching is part of the next MCU being created into this beautiful tapestry akin to the Infinity Saga. This show deserves all the praise it gets. WandaVision, for me, from J Tesla's Nirvana, gets a 5 out of 5. Now, we are going to talk the 9th episode in the next video. So, when you come back, please come back and watch that 9th episode, the 9th episode review. I have thoughts on it, and we're going to talk about it. So, see you guys next time. Peace and much love.